Okay, how's everyone doing today? What's your highlight been so far?
Well, it's a little thing, but my dog was super cute this morning and snuggling like a baby.
For me, a student who's been struggling with being on task, completely on his game today, so that was really awesome.
You should write him a positive referral.
Ooh, what a
Yeah.
wonderful idea.
What a wonderful idea.
My highlight was laughing so hard at lunch that my abs hurt. What about you, Michelle?
Um, this morning we finished up some PB planning and it's looking pretty good. I think people are gonna like it a lot. So, yeah.
Awesome.
All right, are we ready to get started then?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so thank you so much for entering your data ahead of time in that spreadsheet, and for bringing those student note cards that you guys have in the meeting and not meeting piles so far. Let's just go ahead and glance over your overall data and the list of student names that are not yet demonstrating mastery or meeting the standard learning target. So based on that data, which instructional practices proved to be most effective? Megan, it looks like you had the highest percentages for students who demonstrated proficiency on the CFA. How'd you go about teaching this learning target?
So in the past, I struggled with my focused instruction for this learning target. I didn't really have a clear checklist in my head of what I wanted them to know, understand, and do. And our takeaways last year were really helpful for me to be precise during focused instruction this year, especially during my demonstration and Think Aloud. Pulling up our CFA analysis notes from last year before I taught this skill was really helpful. We talked about the patterns we could identify from student mistakes, and we noticed that a lot of students struggled with blending techniques. During my Think Aloud, I made sure to describe my mixing technique as I modeled it and thought aloud about what I was being careful not to overmix, which would compromise the texture of the shake, or making sure that I didn't undermix, which would result in chunks of unblended ice cream and even ingredient distribution.
That is a good call. I totally missed that part in my Think Aloud. Last year, I created the short videos demonstrating how to make the shakes properly, and then I used those videos again last year, but I didn't even think to look back. I could have paused the video to still integrate those stuck points that we noticed last year instead of just showing them as they were. So that was a good call.
So I know we did a CFA a while back assessing their knowledge of the recipes. So how did you revisit that with students prior to this CFA?
So what we talked about during our analysis of that CFA, I had students who weren't demonstrating proficiency to use the manipulatives that Erin used with her students for her universal instruction. Plus, in my daily warm-up that provides students with two different pathways, I've been integrating a recall question related to shake recipes in our daily warm-up so that it's fresh in their minds. I always give them at least two options on the warm-up, whether it's straightforward and hilly or straightforward and mountainous. And the students who weren't yet proficient were advised to complete the straightforward tasks so that they could solidify their understanding.
Awesome. I did have my non-proficient recipe students use the manipulatives too, but I didn't integrate this into our daily warm-up, so that's awesome.
What patterns can you guys identify from the student mistakes that you see?
Well, first I want to celebrate how we decided to mark our note cards because it is now so easy to identify the student mistakes. This coding system was really slick. But one thing I noticed was that I still have several students who don't have the recipes down. Both the ingredients themselves and the proportions or amounts, ratios are a struggle. Of the 8 students I had that weren't meeting, I have on their codes that 5 of them struggled with the recipe itself still. One thing I did notice though was that 2 of those students, they had the ingredients listed correctly on the back of the note card, so they know it, but there was just some sort of a hiccup when they were making the shake, so it was just an error, not really a mistake. But I also noticed that 4 of mine struggled with the blending techniques.
Yeah, it was really nice to be able to reference if they were able to list the proper ingredients. It helped me recognize if it was a knowledge issue or a misstep when applying that knowledge. So of the 4 students who were not meeting for me, every single one of them struggled with proportion. But only 1 got the actual ingredients wrong. So I also had one student who didn't use proper blending technique, and she overblended.
Yep. 4 of my 7 struggled with blending too. 3 overblended and 1 underblended.
I noticed the underblending as well for the students who don't yet have that technique down.
So we'll keep those in mind as we go back to see what we want to do to help those students in our later question. How do you think we can improve this assessment based on your findings from the mistakes?
One of the things I noticed is that it's difficult to assess whether their proportions were correct if they had incorrect ingredients. So
Me too.
it was kind of tricky there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if next year we could do 2 checkpoints where the students show us their note card and we check it kind of on the spot there, like whether it's correct or incorrect. And then we have them create the shake. That way we can catch it early on who needs more practice with the recipe, but if they're able to make the shake correctly, then based on the recipe.
Yes.
Good idea.
Yep.
I'll put that in our
Yeah, I
CFA
want to
notes then.
next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I noticed a couple times as I was doing this assessment that I struggled a bit between deciding if a student's shake was meeting or not meeting. I wondered what you guys would have said. There were some that were barely unblended or barely overblended, and so that was tough. So I'm trying to think about how we can continue improving our inter-rater reliability.
Yeah. If only we could bring the student products we were questioning to our meeting before they melted.
Yeah, that would be nice. We could ask one another their thoughts to help us continue improving our calibration of what that meeting this learning target actually looks like.
So let's talk about what interventions or new instruction are needed to provide these non-proficient students additional time and support.
I was thinking about using stations tomorrow. We know what students need, work on which things, and this could get every student what they need in class.
So what were you thinking for each station?
It seems to make sense to have a few stations. Blending techniques, ingredients, and proportions, that's kind of the mistakes that we noticed. We can assign kids super quickly when we hand them their note cards back. Our abbreviations will tell them which stations they need to visit. I like the idea of using what we have. Erin showed the video demonstrations she made last year. I didn't do that. I did a live demonstration like Megan, but I still have some students struggling with blending techniques. I'm going to type up a couple questions for students to respond to after watching the video to make sure they focus on the blending part of that video.
That's a good idea because that was something that I wish I would have integrated. So I like that. I'm happy to share those videos with you. So what are you thinking about helping students with the actual ingredients and the recipes?
Yep, so based on Megan's results, the instructional strategy she used was pretty effective in helping students learn the recipes. I can have a station with those recipe manipulatives like she used.
And I'm definitely going to integrate that into one of my daily warm-up options as well. Since that's a memorization piece really, I think that keeping those recipes at the forefront are going to help those students transfer it into their long-term memory. It seems like that's what happened with your students. It's that whole multiple exposures thing.
Yeah, for sure. So all 4 of my students not yet meeting struggled with proportions, but they have the ingredients down. So I might alter a station for those students so they only need to spend time on the things that they need. I'm thinking that we already tried the manipulative strategy, so I could either give these students more practice with the proportions only, or I could create a Quizlet for them to practice in a different way. I suppose they could also make flashcards. What do you guys think?
You just made me remember that when I was looking for resources to help students learn these standard recipes, I came upon a Quizlet online. I didn't decide to use it, but I'm sure I can find it again and send it your way.
Thank you. I think for the recipe station, I'm going to let the students choose between a couple of these different options that each focus on improving their internalization of the knowledge.
Yeah, that'll be good. We engage in guided instruction while students are visiting stations and use questions, prompts, and cues to help those struggling.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yep,
Yeah, we can
and,
just like float and wander.
Yep, and we can provide feedback as well.
Good. Love it.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys are gathering your resources to plan Tier 1 intervention in your classrooms tomorrow. Troy, you're going to reshare the Quizlet that you came across for the recipes. Megan, you're going to alter the manipulative cards for students so that they know the ingredients, but you just need help with the proportions. And Erin, you're going to share those videos that you did from last year Oh, Troy, you also said that you were going to create some prompts to go along with those videos that Erin had to make sure that you can address the blending techniques stuck points.
I can do that, Troy.
Great.
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
You're
Aw.
welcome.
Great. Okay, so let's all just share with one another when these things are going to be done, and then let us know when we're ready to move on to our last question.
I can probably have it done. I'll just make sure it's emailed before the end of 7th period. My prep is 6th.
Okay,
So.
yeah, I can have mine done before tomorrow.
All right.
Yep, I'll share the Quizlet tonight.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So now we want to talk about how to extend the learning because you had quite a few students that have already mastered these standards.
Mm-hmm. Which I think we need to celebrate because last year when we gave that big old quiz, we were not seeing this, and it was quite a web to untangle to figure out where we needed to go. So that's awesome that our numbers are as high as they are. One thing that I was thinking as we assessed was that I'm really glad that we thought about the timing aspect of this task. It's not really in our rubric, but we know that for the unit summative, they have to make an entire order in under 30 minutes. So some of our students that were proficient in their recipes and techniques still had a real issue with timing. And so even though, that they're proficient, I think that they could use more practice to increase their fluency and automaticity.
I was thinking the same thing. We talked earlier about what we believe to be an acceptable amount of time for shake making. Are we still in agreement that anything over 5 minutes is too long?
I think so.
Me too, I don't like to wait for that.
So let's sort our meeting cards into 2 piles, those over 5 minutes and those under 5 minutes.
I see where you're going here. What if we add 2 more stations?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's definitely add one for just practice for the purpose of fluency. The students that were meeting but took longer than 5 minutes to finish the order, they can be asked to visit that station to just improve their automaticity.
What about those that are able to complete under 5 minutes? What are your numbers looking like for that?
Why don't you guys go ahead and count now?
I have 3.
I have 4.
I have 3.
Our next unit talks about recipe creation. What if we have a station where these students create a few new recipes? They could do a taste test and then use data to pick the winner.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about the potential for these students to experience some training opportunities. We know that in the restaurant career, trainers are always in demand. What if we built up these students' feedback skills and had them practice giving feedback to those at the fluency station?
Ooh, I really like that idea. We have that quick article we read at PD that talks about high quality feedback. We could have them read that and then provide feedback at the fluency station.
Absolutely. Sounds like a plan.
Fade out.
I'm
typing.
sorry.
I'm typing.
I'll keep going.
We'll just we'll edit that part out.
Do you want me to start my part
Do you want me
over?
to not? Yeah, Len, why don't you start from the beginning and I won't pretend type anymore.
Well, in the past, I struggled with my focused instruction for this target, and I didn't really have a clear checklist in my head of what exactly I wanted them to know, understand, and do. Our takeaways last year were really helpful for me. To be precise during focused instruction this year. Can I just start over?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I feel like I should be making eye contact, but I just keep making you laugh. And I don't.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. We talked earlier about what we believe to be an acceptable amount of time for shake making.
It's shake and bake. I'll help.
I was thinking the same thing. We talked earlier about what we believe to be an acceptable amount of time for shake making. Okay, I got it.
Okay, hang on. I just need to.
I was thinking the same thing. We talked earlier about what we believe to be an acceptable amount of time for shake making. Are we still in agreement?
You guys.
It's her!
I'm Okay.
I want somebody to say, I certainly don't want to wait longer than 5 minutes for a shake.
Take 12.
I have 3.
I see where you're going here. So, what about adding 2 more stations?
No. No, you're up, Aaron.
Oh. Oh. Yeah.
Do you want me to start over and
Yeah,
then cut
yeah.
after we sorted? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, I have 3.
I have 8.
I have 3.
You're so literal.
No, you don't.
I am very literal.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and count again, please.
Okay.